Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I am an alcoholic. It is really, really cool to be here in Charlotte. About 12 years ago, I inherited a house in Statesville, North Carolina, not far from here. And my wife and I came down and we lived here for about 10 months. And we got to know people like Lewis, a bunch of different people. And there's great AA here. I love this state. Um, Family has come from this state, and it's just really, really good to be back here. It's great. My buddy Bill and Dane are here. They came over the mountain from Tennessee to join us, so I'm really glad of that. And whenever I get a chance to do something with Peter, it's always special. So I am an alcoholic. Now here's the weird thing about my alcoholism. There we go. That's much better. Um, I was dying of alcoholism, not knowing what alcoholism was. I knew that I drank too much. The mailman knew I drank too much. Everyone around me knew I drank too much, and I knew I needed to stop. But I didn't have a clue just how aggressive and how all-encompassing alcoholism was. I didn't understand that. So my experience with alcohol is this. If you would have put me in front of a professional at like age 5, they would have said this kid has an early childhood anxiety disorder or something, right? I mean, really what it was I was just not comfortable. I wasn't comfortable in most situations. I just wanted to go home most of the time and be left alone. And I didn't do well in school, and if there was more than 2 or 3 people there, I didn't do well. And I was always worried about something, like what are they going to think? Or, am I going to look lame? I mean, all this stuff was all over me, and it made my life really not that easy to live. And then one day I'm 13 years old, and me and a couple of my buddies decide we're going to get drunk. We'd seen this on, John Wayne movies and stuff. Let's go get drunk. It'll be cool. And so that's what we did. 3 13-year-olds cut school, and we go to my mother's house, and I blow some dust off a bottle of Four Roses whiskey. And I pour 3 big water glasses of this Four Roses whiskey. And the 2 guys I'm drinking with did something that still annoys me to this day. They drank about half their glass and then they pushed it back. They'd had enough. Anybody in here ever drink with people that have enough on you? You know what I mean? Like, what's that all about? I never could, as long as there was alcohol available, I was drinking it until I was unconscious. That's just the way I drank. So they pushed it back and they just watched the show because I got drunker than a hoot owl. I mean, I went into a blackout and came to in a field. I'm a 13-year-old blackout drinker. And any blackout drinkers in here? A lot of hands. Isn't that disconcerting? It's like a bizarre form of time travel. You know what I mean? Like you come to in the future, like handcuffed in the back of a police car or something, like, whoa! Yeah, I got really good at trying to at hinting at, tell me about last night, tell me what did I do? So I became a terrible blackout drinker, and I drank, and the first time I drank that Four Roses whiskey, I got so sick. You remember your first really bad illin that alcohol put on you? You remember that? Well, I'm horizontal for like 2 days. I'm just puking and just my head's spinning and I got a monster headache. But I'm thinking, man, I'm going to make this work somehow, this alcohol. Because what it did was it made me free. Everything that was wrong was made right by this alcohol. I was no longer worrying about what you're thinking about me. I don't have any anxiety. I'm sitting there with my 2 new best friends, and this is great, and this is great, and this is so cool. We're gonna do this every day. This is great. Like it completely changed my perspective on life. And I really thought that this magic elixir called alcohol was was what would make me feel like you probably feel normally, because there's something wrong with me. And I developed a relationship with this alcohol. And over any considerable period of time, alcoholism gets worse. It does not get better. So it's a progressive illness. So what did that look like with me? Well, the one thing, if you were to chart how many ounces of alcohol I was putting in my body every week, the chart would go like this for 19 years. It got, I was drinking more and more and more often, more alcohol. And, it wasn't something that, I was planning. It happens organically. When you're an alcoholic, the progression comes on you organically, and you're just drinking more alcohol. And there were plenty of people who were saying, you really should quit. You got really drunk last night. Do you know what you did? It got to the point where I didn't want you to tell me, because it was getting worse and worse and worse, the things that I was doing in blackouts. But it wasn't like something that I was intentionally doing. That's the thing about alcoholism. I always knew I should cut back. I always knew I should take it easy tonight. I always knew I shouldn't get drunk before I go to court. I always knew that stuff. And yet it was not to happen. So there's a delusion within the alcoholic, thinking that you're somehow going to be able to manage this. Like, if I try a little harder, I'll be able to manage this. So probably the last 10 years of my drinking, I was attempting to manage alcohol. And that I managed it with drugs. I think a lot of us do that. There's drugs that you can manage the hangovers and the alcohol poisoning with. There's drugs that you can keep drinking on. You know what I mean? You could just be in this wide-eyed psychotic state. Just sitting there drinking drink after drink after drink. And I tried managing it that way. Probably the last 3 years of my drinking, I would come to in the clothes that I was wearing the night before, and I'd shake myself up because I got to go to work. I always worked, and I'd go in the bathroom and I'd throw some water on my face. I'd do some vomiting calisthenics, and then I'd go out to my $100 car and go off to my terrible job, and just swearing to God that today is the day. Now listen, I know I've said this before. I know I have said this before, that I'm going to quit drinking, but I mean it this time. The 435 other times I said it, I didn't mean it like I mean it now. And that's the delusion. That's the delusion that I was under, thinking I had some control over this, over putting alcohol in my body, which I didn't. And I didn't know that. I didn't know what powerlessness was until I showed up in Alcoholics Anonymous. Didn't know what it was. I was experiencing it, but I didn't know what it was. I thought that I just didn't try hard enough. Or the guys came over. Or, some excuse that I would use for breaking my promise. And then the last years of my drinking, swearing to God in the morning that I'm not going to pick up. Halfway through the workday, I'd start to think, I know I made a commitment this morning to quit drinking, but that might have been an overreaction. I mean, forever. What I really need to do is, instead of buying a quart, I should buy a pint. Or whatever, and then I'd be drinking again. After swearing off alcohol that morning, I'd be drinking again. Now, I understood that once I started drinking, clear the deck, turn the phones off, lock the doors, we're going to be drinking. I understood that. I didn't do well out there in the world drinking. I wasn't a good bar drinker. I'd get arrested, or I'd pass out on the bar, and bartenders hate that. When you fall asleep on their bar, they get really annoyed. I'd be with my friends and I'd pass out and they'd have to carry me to the car or something. So most of my drinking in the last number of years was just in my house. I wasn't, fit to really leave the house. And it got ugly and it got decadent and it got lonely. You know what I mean? The last couple of years of my drinking you could cut the loneliness with a knife. And you know how I would treat my loneliness? With isolation, because that's what you do. You know what I mean? So it was god awful, this existence, this alcoholic existence. Now, I'd lost my license for a number of DUIs. I don't know about anybody else, but when I was friends let friends drive drunk around my area. You know what I mean? It's just the way it was. And you ain't taking my keys. Those are my keys. You're not getting my keys. It was one of those things if somebody tried to take your keys. So friends let friends drive drunk. And I crashed a ton of cars. And I got some DUIs. And one of these DUIs, for me to be able to get my license back, I had to go to an outpatient treatment program. It was like 8 weeks of outpatient. And I remember going to this. I was no vision for you in outpatient, let me tell you. I start going to this outpatient, and I went sober the first night, but it was so boring that, I decided I don't really have a problem, and I would get drunk, and I went to the next 7 outpatients drunk. And of course, nothing sank in for me, except one thing. I remembered one thing. And it was this. On the 5th and the 6th floor of this hospital wing was the inpatient unit for alcoholism and drug addiction. And if you ever get really, really bad, you go up there and they lock you in for a month. And I remember hearing that, right? Like, oh my God, those poor bastards. And so about 5 years later, when I'm desperate now to separate from alcohol. I'm doing things that just cross every moral line that I have. It's just awful. And I'm getting really dangerous because I'm getting really violent in these blackouts. And I know I'm going to end up in jail. I know I'm going to hurt somebody I love. And I got really desperate, and I signed myself in to that 28-day program. Now, this particular 28-day program, I wouldn't call it the cutting edge of alcoholism treatment. They had something that they used for therapy for me, which I still don't get. It's called group. Anybody ever go to group? You sit around in a big circle and you talk about your day. And I just remember being in this circle, just furious, pissed. Like somebody be talking and I'd be like, will you shut up? Will you shut up? God, who cares? Who cares about you? Well, I don't care. I want to share, And so group just made me more pissed. So that's really all they had there. They didn't have any one-on-one with anybody that had a clue. So I got out of there, and I'd been sober for 28 days. Hey, this is good. I'm sober now. Everything's great. They tell me to go to AA. They tell me to go to outpatient. So I'll go to AA. I'll go to outpatient. That's how desperate I was to separate from alcohol. You got to understand, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to go to outpatient. I don't want to go to AA. But I'll do it because that's how committed I am to this not drinking thing. And then just before I got 90 days, I'm on the way to an AA meeting, and the thought crosses my mind that I should buy a gallon of vodka and drink it. Now wait, hear me out. Okay, you got to understand my reasoning. I thought, I'm not really doing a great job with this AA. I could be doing a much better job. I could be sharing more, and I could be more of a member of this thing. I'll bet if I drank a gallon of vodka, it would remind me of just how bad it is drinking. And I'll shoot back into AA with like a renewed resolve. So this is a good idea. So I bought a gallon of vodka and I started drinking it. And I'm thinking, I'm drinking the first drink. This is good. This is a great idea. I'm really glad I did this. I'm drinking the second drink. This is such a good idea. I'm going to share this to the next meeting I go to. I think everybody should do this. And by the time intoxication washed over me, somewhere in the third drink, I recognized the enormity of my mistake. The enormity of my mistake. I have opened the cage door to the beast, and the beast is going to move me around like a puppet until the beast is done. I knew that. So I knew, how could I have been so stupid? In the book Alcoholics Anonymous, it goes, sometimes we start beating on the bar, asking ourselves, how could we have done this one more time, right? How could this happen one more time, knowing what I know and making the commitment that I made? How could this happen one more time? And I didn't understand the nature of powerlessness. I didn't understand the first step. I'm going to AA meetings, but I'm going to discussion meetings, right? And, discussion meetings would be like this in my area. These were the closest meetings to my house. I go to a discussion meeting. Somebody raise their hand and go, well, I went to the shop today because I had to get my lawnmower blades sharpened, and I get to the shop and I don't have my wallet, and I'm sitting there with a lawnmower blade and no wallet, and it just got worse from there, Thank you for letting me share. And then somebody'd raise their hand and go, yeah, I know just what it's like to not have a wallet when you're getting a lawnmower blade sharpened. I'm sitting in these meetings like, what is going on? First of all, who cares about you or your lawnmower blade? I could care less. What does this have to do with staying sober? I just didn't get it, but I was willing, right? Now, my personal experience was this. The first friend I made in Alcoholics Anonymous, he was a lunatic. His name was Radio Shack Mike. I nicknamed everybody. He's still called Radio Shack Mike 30 years later. He hasn't worked at Radio Shack in 30 years. But Radio Shack Mike was half a psychotic, and he started hanging out with me. Now, understand, this is 1990, Northern New Jersey Alcoholics Anonymous. And Radio Shack Mike wasn't even close to an alcoholic. What happened was he'd been busted with an 8-ball. And his lawyer said, you should go to treatment, and then you should go to AA, and you should get all the AA people to write you letters to the judge. So that's what he did, And listen, this is the thing with him. In 5 minutes, he was happy as could be. In 5 minutes, he's reading spiritual books and praying and meditating. And I'm a basket case psychotic because I have untreated alcoholism. I just want to kill half the people in the meeting. And somehow we end up being friends. And Radio Shack Mike is one of these pious guys. Now he's going to all the New Age bookstores. The spirituality thing really caught on for him because he wasn't an alcoholic. He got busted with an 8-ball. So he's doing great at like a month. I really worry when I see people start to do great like in their first month. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, are you in the right room? So anyway, he's really pious and he's going to all these New Age bookstores. And one day he comes up to me and he goes, Chris, do you have a pyramid over your bed, Chris? Oh man, I put a pyramid over my bed. Oh, my life has changed. And the next day he'd go, Chris, crystals. You got to get yourself some crystals, dude. I got these crystals. You got to get some crystals. You'll probably need the strong ones, but you got to get some crystals. And then one day he's like, affirmations. I got this book of affirmations. My life has never been better. And he's like this pious guy. Now he gives me a book of affirmations and I'm trying them, right? Trying to treat alcoholism with affirmations is like trying to stop a semi with a cobweb. You know what I mean? But I'm sitting in front of the mirror. Chris is great. I'm going to kill Mike, you know? So I'm worried. I'm worried because none of the stuff that he does that works for him is working for me because he got busted with an 8-ball. That stuff will work for him. Self-help stuff will work for somebody like that. It's not going to work for an alcoholic. So what happens, though, is one day he comes up to me and he hands me a set of 8 90-minute tapes, cassette tapes. It's back in the cassette tape days, right? And I go, dude, what's that? He goes, oh, man, it's a big book workshop. I go, big book? I go, you mean the book they give you in treatment? He goes, yeah, the book Alcoholics Anonymous. He goes, it's a workshop on that book. They break it down. I go, okay, who's breaking it down? A couple of guys from Arkansas. Like Arkansas, and I look at the tapes and I do the math. It's 12 hours. 8 90-minute tapes is 12 hours. I'm going to listen to somebody talk about a book that was written in 1939. A couple of guys from Arkansas are going to talk about it for 12 hours. But he makes me promise to listen to it. And so I do. I've got like a half an hour to work, and I got a cassette player in my car, and I start listening to this workshop. Now, my first impression was, who the hell are these guys? This is crap. I mean, what Joe and Charlie were doing was they were putting the spiritual mechanics around the recovery program that's laid out in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So they would tell you what a step will do, how to take that step, what will happen after you take that step, exactly how to take the step. And I wasn't hearing any of that stuff in the meetings I was in. I was hearing, I didn't have my wallet, when I was getting the lawnmower blade sharpened. So it was like another language to me. What are these guys talking about? And I go through this whole set of tapes, and I shove them aside, and I go, maybe that's how they do it in Arkansas. But in New Jersey, we share, And I shoved the tapes aside, really upset. It was almost as bad as the affirmation book. So what happens to us in Alcoholics Anonymous? It'll happen to any of us. And that's you can describe it in many different ways. The dark night of the soul, you get put in the barrel. A set of situations or circumstances will be placed in front of you that will be incredibly difficult to navigate through in the emotional and spiritual state that you're in if there's no recovery. And that's what happened to me. There was this girl I'd started to date, and you should have seen the look on my sponsor's face when I went there. Phil, I started to date so-and-so. He's like, oh no. He's thinking, an uninterrupted series of phone calls 3 times a day for the next 6 months. He's thinking, this is going to be bad. And so I started to date this girl, and it didn't work out. I'd first met her on the druggy buggy. I mean, what could go wrong with a setup like that? I don't know, but it didn't work out. I lost my job because there was a downturn in the economy, and I went from running an electrical crew of like 8 guys, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. I'm the last guy left, and then there's not enough work for me, so I'm out of work, and I started to get letters from Florida with language like fleeing to avoid prosecution. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but there'd be some problems that I would have, misunderstandings that I would have with different people, and I would have court dates or fines to pay or community service to do or ambulance bills that were coming in the mail. And I don't know about anybody else. That's all a to-do. I don't do that stuff. I don't go to court. I don't do paperwork. That's really the way I was. I don't do paperwork. I don't like paperwork. I was so selfish and self-centered. If it wasn't something I wanted to do, I wouldn't do it. So if you do that enough in a state, you got to leave. You got to come to the conclusion that Ma needs some help around the house. I think I'll move back with Ma. And that's what I did. So all this is just a huge emotional and spiritual burden on me. I mean, here I am sober like 6 months, and all this trouble. What the hell is going on? And I was just, I know now what a nervous breakdown is. That's what I had. I had like a nervous breakdown. I remember going over to my sponsor's house, and my sponsor said something very. I could barely talk, but when I told him what was going on, he goes, "Do you pray?" I love sponsors. Here's the thing. You think your sponsor just doesn't get it. Like I remember one time, Phil, they're coming to get me. They're going to break my legs. They're coming to get me. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. Chris, I'd like to see you at a meeting tonight. Do you want me to explain it slower, Phil? You know what I mean? I need guns. I don't need a meeting, But the good sponsors, what the good sponsors will do is they'll point you toward the solution. They're not going to help you manage the symptoms of an illness. They're going to try to get you to the recovery thing, right? So why would he try to help me manage a life that I have to admit is unmanageable? Why would he do that? So he kept pointing me toward the solution, and it looked like he was stupid, But he was very profound. He kept pointing me back to where the healing is going to happen. And I remember I was at a jumping off point at 6 months sober. And it's really sad. It's really sad how many alcoholics don't make it past that jumping off point. We're something like 30 times more likely to kill ourselves through suicide than non-alcoholics. Do you believe that? I'm sure from personal experience. There's very few in here who haven't contemplated that, I'm sure. Relapse is huge in Alcoholics Anonymous. So what happens is we get to a point where we can't deal emotionally with life on life's terms, and we're put in a position that's a jumping off point. So some of us jump to alcohol. Some of us jump to just finish it all off. What happened with me, and I believe this is definitely the grace of God, was I remembered those tapes. I remembered those tapes because the truth in those tapes haunted me. There's a line in the chapter Working with Others that basically says this: if you've disturbed somebody about their alcoholism, this is all to the good. And it's one of the things Peter and I try to do. We try to be very polite while we're disturbing, but we really do want to disturb people about their alcoholism, because in the disturbance comes a renewed resolve to not be disturbed anymore. Don't you want to not be disturbed? I do. And the recovery process, what the recovery process does is it renders us pretty much undisturbed after a period of time. It renders us very useful and very undisturbed. That's my personal experience. Anyway, I pulled those tapes back out. I opened up the big book that I'd gotten in treatment. It was funny. I hadn't opened this thing since treatment. It had been about a year. And I looked, and I had forgotten this, but all of my new best friends that I was going to stay in touch with the rest of my life that I never heard from again had written in my big book. And I remember reading the first one: Chris, you crazy bastard, you're never going to make it. Love, Harry. Yeah, it was in my book. I still have that book. So I blew the dust off the big book. I started listening to these tapes. I grabbed a notebook and a pen, and I started to do the Joe and Charlie-esque run through the steps. And I really need to tell you, it was a very imperfect, very cursory movement through the steps. But that's really when I started to recover from alcoholism, when I started to look at that stuff. Now, here's what I understand about the first step today. I believe that I have something that is so overpowering. In the book Alcoholics Anonymous, it goes over this material again and again and again. It talks about Jim. It talks about Fred. It talks about the man of 30. It talks about the jaywalker. Bill Wilson in his story. It just example after example after example after example of people who honestly wanted to separate from alcohol who could not do it, on their own. And then it talks about, especially in the doctor's opinion, it talks about this allergy that the alcoholic has, this phenomenon of craving. So what I have is this. I have a mind that is prone to obsession. Now, what does an obsession look like? What does it look like to me? To me, it looks like I'm going to go to a meeting. My sponsor will be there. He wants to talk to me after the meeting. What's her name will be there. That'll be nice. And, maybe we'll go out to the diner afterward. I think I'll stop and get a gallon of vodka and drink it. Now, the obsession is that thought that leapfrogs above all the other common sense, all the other stuff that's in my own self-preservation, and it becomes primary. So it's an obsession, and it's not something I'm in control of. If I'm in an unrecovered state, I am prey to the obsession. And the obsession is, I'm telling you, it talks in this book about the obsession. It says sometimes we think about it before we drink. Sometimes we'll use some trivial excuse when we go out and drink. But if you really look at that going out and drinking, you have to understand that it comes from a place of insanity. Because knowing what we know about what alcohol has done to us in our lives and the people we love, it has to come from a place of insanity for us to put it back in our body. It has to. Now that obsession, that thought that leapfrogs above all the other ones, I think I'll buy a gallon of vodka and drink it, is what I'm prey to. That's part of alcoholism. That's a symptom of alcoholism, that obsession of the mind that they talk about in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's not good news. Listen, alcoholism is such an unorthodox illness, and it's so misunderstood by so many people. So many people still think we're just weak-willed. So many people just think, oh, he decided to go out and drink. There's so much stigma and there's so much misunderstanding about alcoholism. Folks, how much power is powerless? It's right up there with not a whole hell of a lot. You know what I mean? If I could have done better, I would have. So that's not good news. The craving presents in me like this. The first drink always does one thing. Asks for the second drink. Second drink insists on the third demands the fourth, and I want the 27th drink more than I wanted the 26th drink. Because the more alcohol in my body, the more my body and my mind wants more alcohol. Now that's not normal. Only 1 out of 10 people on this planet, or in this country at least, have that. That's a genetic, that's a biological, that's something that is different. Aunt Fanny and Uncle Fudd don't close the bottle club if you give them a glass of wine at Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? Like, I am bodily and mentally different than my fellows. And this is the bad news that the book Alcoholics Anonymous carries. Dr. Silkworth, he's the chief psychiatrist at the #1 hospital for alcoholism and drug dependence in the 30s. He's the #1 guy. And he says, if you go past that point of no return, which is into alcoholism, you're going to have to get locked up to survive. They're going to have to lock you up to survive. And they used to do that. My grandfather was locked up for life. My great-grandfather was locked up for life. My father's father was a little bit out of control, and that's back when 2 doctors could sign a slip and you're gone forever, man. You're in the home. You're in Happy Hills the rest of your life. And he spent the last 40 years of his life in Happy Hills. Because that was the only thing that they knew to do. If you were hopeless, if you were a real alcoholic, if you were hopeless. Now, the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is People come in before they're hopeless, and that's a good thing. People come in here who still have some power, choice, and control, who can still make a decision not to drink and have that decision mean something. But there's also the alcoholics that show up in here who can't do that. And you know, a lot of times they are misunderstood. Oh, he just doesn't want it. You know, he's just not being honest. Well, how about he's an alcoholic who's not gone through the steps? How about that? How about it's not his fault? How about it's your fault? You know, like I truly believe that today. You know, have you tried to take him through the steps? So that's what I believe about the first part of step one. But then there's a dash, right? Then there's a dash that our lives had become unmanageable. Now, could I admit that my life became unmanageable? Yeah, when I was drinking. My life was unmanageable when I was drinking. That ain't what they're talking about. They're talking about, can I manage my own life in a good way? So I believe that there's external unmanageability, and that's the crash cars, the waking up in jail, not knowing why you're there, the divorces, you know, all the lost jobs, all that stuff. Sure, that's unmanageability. I'll give you that. But non-alcoholics have that kind of stuff too, when they drink. Non-alcoholics can get DUIs. Non-alcoholics can get divorces. It's got to be something deeper. You know, what do they mean by I can't manage my own life? And the information in the book Alcoholics Anonymous paints a pretty bleak picture for me as far as quality of life. The bleak picture that it paints is this. On a good day, I'm restless, I'm irritable, and I'm discontented. Anybody in here relate to that? You know, you ever get cranky? You ever just want to get the hell out of there? You know what I mean? Like, shouldn't things be a lot better than they are now? You know, restless, irritable, and discontent. Those are emotional states. That's a good day. A normal day for me is prey to misery, depression, anxiety, self-centered fear, resentment, you know, just and guilt and shame and remorse over the things that I've done, because I'm just horrified at how I've behaved over the years, right? So I beat myself up with this shame and this guilt. Now, that's a normal day. A bad day is pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. You know, coming to one more time with the DUI summons in your back pocket. You know what I mean? Or coming home after a 3-day tear and finding all your possessions out in the front yard. You know, pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. You know, really just letting yourself and everybody down around you and just not being able to tolerate that. Because I don't believe we're bad people. We do bad things. I just don't believe that we're bad people. The hideous four horsemen: terror, frustration, bewilderment, and despair. I believe that is a picture of unmanageability. What kind of a quality of life do I have? I can't control my emotional nature. I can't seem to make a life that I can be really satisfied with and really proud of. I can't seem to put that stuff together. Everything always slips out of my hands. You know, I build a bright outlook, you know, for the new people I'm hanging out with, and I tear it down in a series of senseless sprees. Now that's what the first step is showing me and telling me in the information that's in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's not good news. It's Custer's last stand, and there's more Indians coming. You know, and I'm going to meetings. I'm going to meetings. I got this guy Phil as a sponsor, and he only told me one thing. He saw how shot out I was. Oh man, I was shot, and I was sensitive, and I was like, I had the tension of a garage door spring, you know, when I showed up here, you know, and he said one thing. He goes, Chris, I want to see you at a meeting every night until I tell you to stop. So I did. I went to a meeting every night, and he moved away and forgot to tell me to stop. So like for the first 8 years, I went to a meeting every night. You know, I did. I tried to be as compliant as I could with this stuff. I was desperate. But it wasn't the meetings that was changing the way I was inside. It wasn't the meetings that were changing my emotional state. You know, I was staying sober, yes, but I was still suffering from the stuff that I had suffered from in between drinks before I quit drinking. And I'll show you just how crazy I was. I remember there was the Oak group and the Chestnut group at the top of my street. And it was the craziest sharing you'd ever seen. Like, we'd just gone through a lot of psychological stuff, and so many of the people in these meetings had come out of treatment, and there was just so many mixed messages. It was like Alcoholics Anonymous gone wild. You know, that's what it was like in 1990 in these discussion meetings. And I remember sitting in the discussion meeting, and now I've got to look like a good AA, right? I don't want anybody thinking poorly of me. So I'd act like an AA member. And then I'd look over and he would raise his hand. You know exactly who I'm talking about, right? Oh my God, he raised his hand. Oh, please don't call him. Oh, what a blowhard this guy is. Oh my God, they called on him. Oh, now I'm going to have to sit here for 5 minutes and hear him talk about his family. Buddy, tell somebody who cares. I'm gonna want that 5 minutes back. You know, oh, he's grateful now. Oh, he's sharing that he's grateful. That warms the cockles of my heart that he's grateful. I think I'll go outside and slash all 4 of his tires. And then I'll walk out of the meeting with him because I want to see how that gratitude holds up under adversity. You know, and all this is going through my head. And, finally, thank God he's done. Thank God he's done. And I'm sitting here like this, like a good AA. Thanks for sharing. Now this is the stuff that's going through my head. I can't tell you about it. You'd throw a net over me. That's obviously psychotic thought patterns. You know what I mean? So that's what's going on with me in an unrecovered state. I'm a lunatic. I look okay because, folks, we know how to like show up sane. You know, it's like a skill set we have, whether we're sane or not. You know, we can look sane, but I'm out of my mind. So I start going through these steps, and I'll tell you what, this is what I believe. I believe that I came into all of you with a broken spirit. My spirit was broken. I mean, if you'd let everybody down, I let down. I mean, it just was pathetic. The things I put my mother through, the things I put my family through, the things I put my ex-wife through, the things I put my child through, it's just, it breaks your spirit to be that guy. And I showed up with you with a crushed spirit. And as I start to go through these steps, I start to understand a little bit more about myself, and I start to recover from alcoholism. I start the spiritual, emotional recovery from alcoholism. I start to get sane. And that happened very slowly over the course of time, because it was very slowly over the course of time I went through the steps. It talks about in the spiritual appendix, it says that some of us have the slow educational variety because we slowly go through the steps, and that was me. I was on my own. There was nobody in my area that was taking anybody through the steps at that period of time. I had the Joe and Charlie tapes, and that was it. So I started to heal from alcoholism. I did a very imperfect run through the steps, and I started to believe that there's a power. There's a spiritual power that I can gain access to that's going to solve this problem of alcoholism. Now this was an organic thing for me. It wasn't like all of a sudden it dawned on me that there's God couldn't would, it wasn't like that at all for me. It was like I started to believe that there was power in the meetings. I keep going to a meeting and I'm staying sober. I keep listening to these people. They're giving great wisdom teachings. They're giving great one-liners. It was like the land of the one-liner. There was this old guy who used to chew a cigar. His name was Joe. And everybody adored this guy. He was the king of the one-liners. He'd be chewing a cigar. He'd go, "Kid, underneath every skirt is a slit." And everybody'd go, "Whoa!" Whoa. He was like the king of the one-liners. So I'm gaining some intellectual understanding of this spirituality, right? Some intellectual stuff. But when I started to go through the steps, I started to gain it experientially. Now, in the beginning, I thought that the power resides with all of you. There's a spiritual power. What we can do together, what we can't do by ourselves, and that's not wrong. And then I started to think, if I get a sponsor and I place myself unreservedly under his care and direction, he is going to, and I follow his direction, there's going to be some power from that. And that's not wrong. And then I start to believe that, if I go through these 12 steps, if I end up with a spiritual awakening, that's going to present me with a power that's going to be able to solve my problem. And that's not wrong either. But what I believe today is I do all of this stuff. I do all of my Alcoholics Anonymous work. I do all my spiritual work. I do all my step work. I do all my prayer and meditation work as an expression of gratitude for he who is already keeping me sober and has placed me in a recovered state of mind. So the power, it's funny, it says we find it deep down within us, but it also says it's a power greater than ourselves. It's one of those conundrums that you run up against in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like, how do you hang on? How do you hang on? Well, you let go. It's like one of those conundrums. But it's true. It's true. I have over the years, this relationship that I've developed with the Spirit is something that it's hard for me to even describe in English language. Now, there's a couple of things I want to read here, if you'll permit me. One day I was asked, Chris, would you talk on spirituality for an hour? I'm like, oh, sure. So what do? You go to the Google and you pull down some information off the Google is what you do. And I found that spirituality is kind of like alcoholism. There's no set definition, but there's descriptions. There's description of spirituality. It says spirituality includes a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves, and it typically involves a search for meaning in life. That resonates with me. Spirituality refers to a broad set of principles that transcend all religions. Spirituality is about the relationship between ourselves and something larger. I like that too. But my favorite is this. Spirituality is an interpersonal pathway to connection with the divine. You know what the book Alcoholics Anonymous is? If you follow the instructions in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, it's an interpersonal pathway to connection with the divine. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, okay, that's what this whole thing is about. This whole thing is about healing and connecting spiritually. Now, I don't know about anybody else. I had some doubts about all this stuff because I had some experiences with religion and religious people up to this point in time, and I was like, that stuff's really not for me. And the difference between religion and spirituality, it says, is this: religion is a specific set of organized beliefs and practices, usually shared by a community or group. Now, I'm 11 years old, and my parents take me up to church and put me in Sunday school to be confirmed as a Methodist. We're Methodists. You're going to be a Methodist. Go to confirmation. And what they taught me in there is, this is what we believe. We believe this. We believe this. We believe this. We believe this. You believe all that stuff, and we'll confirm you as a Methodist. So, that statement is correct. It says spirituality is more of an individual practice, and it has to do with having a sense of peace and purpose. It also relates to the process of developing beliefs around the meaning of life and connection with others. The big hole in my life was connection to others. I wanted to have a crew. I'm from New Jersey, we want like a crew. And I could never get friends that would stay loyal. I could never establish these relationships. But here's the truth of the matter. For 100,000 years, human beings lived tribally. Right? This is up until like the modern era, a couple thousand years ago, when we became when we started growing agriculture, right? But up until that point in time, you know what we were? We were hunter-gatherers. And what would happen is we would have a group of people, somewhere around 20 adults, maybe 40 children, and we'd move around and try to find food and try to not get killed. For like 100,000 years, that's how we lived. Tribally, connected. We worked together. We were part of a group. And all of a sudden now there's modern society where, we sit on a computer all day long or something. There's something missing. And I believe that missing piece is the fellowship that I've been blessed enough to experience. We connect with each other because we're genetically programmed to do that. That's what human beings are supposed to do. So connection with others. And the real way to be able to connect with others is spiritually. I'm going to read a couple of things, and then I'm going to sit down. And I guess we'll take a break, and then Peter's going to come up. And I'm looking forward to that. All right, I'm going to give you the bad news first. I'll give you some good news and give you some bad news. Here's the bad news. Unless each AA member, this is from page 174 in Tradition 9 of the 12 and 12. Unless each AA member follows to the best of their ability our suggested 12 steps to recovery, they almost certainly sign their own death warrant. You think if we don't practice the 12 steps to the best of our ability, we're signing our own death warrant? I don't remember that being a topic in the closed-minded discussion meeting. Their drunkenness and disillusion are not penalties inflicted by people in authority. They result from their personal disobedience to spiritual principles. Let me unpack that because I believe that's true today. After 32 years of being a strong AA member, sponsoring a gazillion lunatics, being involved with, all these different organizations that have to do with helping us, I believe this is true. It says, our drunkenness and disillusion are not penalties inflicted by people in authority. In other words, we're not punished with drunkenness or disillusion. What happens is they result from my personal disobedience to spiritual principles. See the 12 steps up on the wall? Yeah, but I don't think that's going to be necessary in my case. Okay, if you're an alcoholic, you're taking a big chance, We are going to be punished with drunkenness by our personal disobedience to spiritual principles. I believe that's true. Listen, my ego always wants to come up with a reason. I drank yesterday, Bill, I drank yesterday. Why'd you get drunk? Well, she left me. Well, weren't you drinking when she stayed? Yeah. Why were you drinking? I lost my job. I got no money. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Didn't you get drunk when you got a good job and you had a lot of money? Yeah. We want it to be causal. We want to be able to say we got drunk because of something out there. But it's an inside issue. It results from our own personal disobedience to spiritual principles. So that's the bad news. Now, what I want to do is I want to read the good news because I don't want to leave you with bad news. Peter would fix it anyway if I did. Peter always fixes things for me. All right, this is from the foreword of the 12 and 12. I know this is a big book workshop. It's the last stuff I'll read from the 12 and 12. All right, it's going to be big book moving forward. It says, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. What a great statement. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. All right, what are the 12 steps? They're a group of spiritual principles. All right, what happens if I practice those things? If practice is a way of life, they expel the obsession So in the first step where we admit that we are subject and prey to the obsession, practicing the 12 steps removes that. We're released from that. It's not like we're going to have to fight it. We're going to be released from that obsession. And it will enable us to become happily and usefully whole. Don't you want to be happy and usefully whole? That's what I always wanted. I tried to find that in a bottle of whiskey. A bottle of whiskey would make me feel happily and usefully whole, even though I was good for absolutely nothing when I drank it, you know? So anyway, that's kind of my experience, my personal experience with the first two steps. Let's take, what do you want to take, a 10-minute break, 15-minute break? What do you take around here? Let's take 15 minutes, and then Peter can come up and finish us off. All right.
Oh, can it be that you're here with me? Let's start writing our own history. Let's take this road, oh, this winding, winding road. Let's just take the long way home.